All right. So welcome to today's webinar. We have some constituents from SimSpace and Coalfire, partners in some of the cybersecurity realm. And our webinar for today is going to be exploring the gap between assumed security and proven resilience. So not just what are our assumptions about us being secure, but how do we actually know that? How do we prove that? And joined today by some red teamers as well, which will help us understand how the attackers think and certainly how we can navigate erecting certain cybersecurity defenses. I'm joined today by Scott Brink, a senior manager and network pen tester over at Coalfire with expertise across Active Directory pen testing, who's delivered multiple industry level trainings around attacking AD from Linux at DEF CON's Red Team Village, and even done some visitor management system CVEs that were presented at ThoughtCon a few years back. We're also joined by Neil Weiler, Vice President of Defensive Services from Coalfire, spent 20 years as a security professional, focusing on pen testing, physical security, incident response, and threat hunting, and been a staff member over at Black Hat, had security briefings for 22 years. We're also joined by Bart Stump, Managing Principal on Coalfire's Defensive Security and Services team with over 15 years of experience in networking and cybersecurity. Bart's one of two NOC leads responsible for designing, deploying, and maintaining the network infrastructure at Black Hat conferences worldwide. And then certainly last but not least, Jason Rivera, Field CISO at SimSpace, who's internationally seasoned U.S. military veteran with experience across CrowdStrike, Deloitte, U.S. Army, technology startups, and then commercial ever since. My name is Graham Westbrook. I'll be hosting the panel today, VP of Sales Engineering at SimSpace, former practitioner with experience across defense, healthcare, and commercial. So here we are, and guys, we'll kind of jump straight into it, particularly the most interesting questions. But the one that has surfaced to really kick things off is when you're doing red team and pen testing assessments to try to understand the adversary, how do you know when you interact with a security tool that is good enough? Meaning, is there a sort of a point where when you hit that wall, you're like, okay, wow, this organization's fairly secure. It would require a lot more effort to get past this. So do you know where that line is? And if so, where sort of when do you know whether or not it's a meaningful security mechanism?
Who wants to start? I guess I'll jump in since I was the one unmuted. But I think when there's resistance, right? Like I think like all of us can probably say that one of the things about being on the offensive side of the house and going in and doing pen tests or red team engagements is that there's often a significant success rate, and that can either be as easy as walking in the door or having to spend time really figuring out how to get into an organization. And so I think you've found somebody who knows what they're doing when you actually feel that resistance, when you have to earn it, when you have to work for it. And I think that as red teamers and pen testers, that's a more satisfying job to do.
Scott, I guess I'm curious from your perspective, just given your red team experience, like where's that line for you, and what does that resistance look like?
Yeah, and that resistance is the perfect way to put it. So a lot of time as pen testers or red teamers, more for pen testers, you won't even get to see what was detected or what actually was interacted with unless the blue team tells you. But you definitely will see that resistance. So a lot of the time, the preventative stuff is really what gets in your way. One of the most common things is credential dumping. So using things like Mimikatz, things like secrets dump, any of the Impact tooling to dump credentials. That is one of the most common ways once you have administrators somewhere to laterally move between systems. But if that credential dumping gets stopped, that is a huge pain for anyone trying to move laterally within an environment. So things that are stopping common attacks, just actually preventing them in place, are some of the most annoying things to deal with as an attacker, which is kind of that good enough line, is stopping those baseline credential dumping, things like that. Now, sure, there are ways to get around those, but rather than you taking 10 seconds to dump credential, you've now taken an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, which is a very significant amount of time.
Is that where you face or encounter some of the low-hanging fruit, sort of where like there are other easier, softer targets to go after as a red teamer? You're like, you kind of hit that resistance and you're like, okay, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. I'm going to go find another target.
Yeah, a common thing is LSAS is PPL, the protected process. You can enable that on a host, and all of a sudden, dumping LSAS goes from easy to very hard, and you have to go really in depth. So a lot of times, from an attacker stance, it's not worth it to go there because you can go after some other network resource that may be easier or, like you said, softer to go after. So yeah, that preventative those preventative measures definitely stop some attacks.
Last question for you directly is how do you actually measure what would be considered easier or very hard? Is that in terms of the hours that you're going to have to spend as a human to try to get past those mechanisms?
Yeah, and it does really depend. Like sometimes you can be like, oh, it's as simple as obfuscate the code a little bit. It's as simple as change the method in which we're dumping credentials. But it really depends on what thing is getting in your way. So if, for example, you try to dump SAM or LSA, which you're just going and pulling the relevant files from the registry, and you're getting stopped there, there's a lot of different ways you can interact with it. But once you try, let's say, the 5 or 6 different ways that you know how, then you have to stop and think, okay, now I need to get really custom here. Is it worth it? Am I potentially just fishing for something here? Is it worth it to go for somewhere else? So it really depends on how how valuable the information there is,
Hmm.
and is it beneficial to spend a lot of time bypassing this? If by bypassing that preventative measure will lead to full domain admin compromise or something, then yeah, it's worth it. It may be hard, but it's worth it. But if it's smaller credential dumps, a lot of the time just stopping the common stuff will be enough to just keep people away from it.
Hmm. This one more targeted more toward Bart or Jason. From a defensive perspective, how are we trying to evaluate our assumptions and ultimately get to this place of what we're calling proven resilience, where we can trust the defenses that we have in place?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of risk itself, probability and impact, is a good way to kind of measure what you're going to do. And then you take that and multiply it across, like, well, what is the low-hanging fruit, kind of to Scott's point. And so if I have a vulnerability or an issue within my environment that is both high probability and high impact, then I should probably address that. Credential theft, particularly credential theft and usage as it pertains to somebody with privileged access, would be one of those areas, right? It's a high probability event because credentials are literally everywhere. I mean, Graham, you and I, some of the former employers we've worked at with the intelligence capabilities we've seen, yes, it's all over the dark web. It's all over with our adversaries. And so we already have a high probability event. But then on top of that high probability event, you have a high impact event because if you have valid credentials, well, then you are masquerading and acting as that person. And if they have high privilege, then you have a multiplied issue, right? And so, like, I think both the adversary and the defender both sort of look at it like that. They look at probability and impact. And whereas the adversary says, how can I go after the things with the highest probability and the highest impact and target those? The defender says the inverse. How can I think like the adversary and then patch up those things that are of the highest probability and highest impact? And how do I get those low hanging fruit items first? And so that for me is kind of how I think I would imagine that they calculate it out.
Yeah, and I'd echo that a little bit. Actually, one of the things that we talk about here at Coalfire is kind of doing everything that we do threat informed, right? So we want to make sure that we're narrowing down that scope as to what we're looking at and what we're kind of focusing our, whether it's threat hunts, even pen tests, right? They're what the adversaries are going to be doing in that vertical for that customer, what they're doing today in the last 30, 90 days, right? What any of those TTPs are, and kind of focus that scope in what you're doing and what you're looking for. And then to Jason's point, kind of focusing along that attack graph, if you will, and patching those low hanging fruits and filling the gaps where you can, because you're never going to be able to solve everything, right? And so once you kind of look at the elephant, if you will, proverbially, still didn't get it. You're gonna have issues there, right? So if you at least just focus on that portion that you're going to be concerned about, that will cover the 95% of the issues that you would see in the real world. we think that that's obviously the better way to go and focus that scope in.
You bring up a great point with threat informed, and I'm curious with adversarial AI starting to take shape and starting to target organizations. What are you guys' perspective on how to prepare for that? And in what ways is adversarial AI actually going to be better or worse than humans in the next 1 to 3 years?
I think one of the big things that you're already seeing is obviously just some of the basic language models. When you're talking about phishing and spear phishing, there's some things that we kind of cut down against some of their low hanging fruit as well. So when you're looking at defense, I think there's going to be a lot of things from programming, some of the other things that they're doing that will kind of knock out things a little bit quicker for them, and we need to be able to react the same way. To Jason's point again, deal with low hanging fruit, do what we can as much automated, make sure that we have a combination. As much as it sounds cliche, people, process, and technology really play together, right? You need to have a combination of those. You need to have the people that can really run the technology you have, but have the processes in place to deal with those issues that come up. And then, as you can, when technology comes into play at a point, the stock maturity, you can automate as much of that as possible as well, and kind of catch up. I think a little bit with the adversaries when we're talking about some of their it's going to cut down some of their time more than anything for deployment, but I don't think it's necessarily a huge change or a skill gap that would be anything that we would be out of the norm that we
Yeah,
see.
I think that's one of the things is we're always super focused on like, oh, there's some type of new technology or new technique or something. I'm like, oh, the attackers are going to use this. The attackers are going to use this. And it's like, are we as defenders not? Like, of course, we're going to use the same thing. Like, this is the cat and mouse game that we have played since, the beginning of time, essentially, is, oh, okay, here's something else that somebody can use for bad. And it's like, okay, well, that doesn't, preclude us from using it for good. So there are things that make it easier for an attacker or more efficient for an attacker or allows them to, process a lot more data to find an attack that's more, useful to them. But we get to do the same thing on the other side, right? So we get to use these technologies to help us, shore up our defenses or tell us where we should be focused or where we have fallen down in the past or understand where attackers have been the most successful in the past as well. So we spend a lot of time saying like, oh no, like attackers are going to use this thing. And it's like, well, yeah, but so are defenders. We're going to be fine.
I agree with Neil. I think there's been a lot of hyperbolic thought put into the idea of AI as this new attack methodology, an AI attack. Well, what is AI? I mean, AI in my head is sort of a force multiplying effect. It is not an attack in of itself, but rather a force multiplying effect that can be used both offensively and defensively, which then begs the question, well, what are these effects that it can force multiply? Probably the easiest way to understand any adversarial attack, at least for me, is I look at it across kind of three variables: volume, speed, and sophistication. So what does AI do to those three things? Well, volumetrically, and this kind of dovetails off what Bart said, it's going to create more stuff, right? Probably the most notable more thing that it is doing would be in the realm of social engineering. Highly competent, highly well-crafted social engineering attacks that possess a great degree of contextually relevance, produced at a volumetric rate faster than what humans are going to do. So that would be an example of the volume piece. Speed's pretty easy too. Probably the best measure I've seen of this is what CrowdStrike calls breakout time, which is how long it takes the adversary once they gain access to move laterally. And so, I mean, if you think about like what that was in 2018, it was like 17 minutes, 50 something seconds. 2003, it was 2 minutes and 7 seconds. 2024, it was 54 seconds. And so just keep going with that logic, right? What happens when AI starts getting involved in that? Well, then eventually it approaches zero. What does it mean when breakout time approaches zero? Well, it means that humans, with their ability to respond and think about things, perhaps not as relevant as before. And then the last measure would be sophistication. So same logic there, right? What is the attack capable of doing? What new and novel means will it allow for me to get inside the network? And once I'm inside the network, what can I accomplish? Sophistication with something that's exponentially more intelligent than us in a lot of different ways that can think exponentially faster. I think you look at a kind of sophistication situation where it creates a capability, it validates it, sees what's wrong, recreates it much faster than a human could, right? And so I tend to look at it like that, like a force multiplication effect, as opposed to a unique attack in of itself.
Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, demystifying that, yes, it can help accelerate what humans are capable of doing, but it's not doing anything net new anytime soon. Which actually reminds me a lot of how certain vendors, which I will not name, do glorify the threat actor. And it becomes sort of like oh no, these people almost aren't human. But at the end of the day, people are fighting people. And thus, yes, it takes one, mistake of ours for attackers to get in, but it also takes one mistake of theirs for us to know that they're there. So I love that sort of demystification and rebalancing of the approach. I appreciate that. Scott, the next question I had was around sort of threat intelligence. I'm really curious from your perspective, how do you interpret what's going on now and emerging into your refined red team and pen testing approaches?
Yeah, so threat intel has gotten really good nowadays. For those who haven't taken a look at like large threat intel feeds, there is very, very detailed information on individual APTs, all of the most common things they do, their kind of standard operating procedures. And analyzing that really lets us figure out here is what is realistic for an attacker to do. So when we're performing these tests, we take a look at their industry. Let's say it's healthcare, for example, and we find any APTs that target healthcare and say, okay, they usually do things X, Y, and Z. And we'll make sure every single time we're working with one of those groups, we will do X, Y, and Z. Now, we won't do the exact same command using the exact same tool, but we'll follow the type of techniques that they were doing to really make sure that when that client actually deals with an APT, they would have they've already interacted with someone who's doing all of the same types of attacks and techniques. And sure, we do a couple more things than exactly what is reported in the threat intel, but threat intel has gotten significantly better, making it much easier to realistically emulate what an adversary is doing.
I would imagine particularly up the pyramid of pain toward that technique level that you're talking about, right? Emulating not just hashes and IP infrastructure, but TTPs.
Yeah, exactly. Like down to the TTP, like they will do LDAP enumeration in a very specific way. So we will do LDAP enumeration in a very specific way that kind of matches up with what they're doing.
Yeah. I did hear from MITRE there's a new publication called Summiting the Pyramid, I believe, that is about detection engineering as well. So actually working your way up that pyramid in order to create detection logic at the SIM and EDR level to find bad faster. Not sure if anyone's stumbled across that, but something for the participants here to look into. Our last question as we wrap up before taking any questions and answers is, I guess, more toward Bart, Neil, and Jason in particular. I'm curious from a defensive perspective, if you had, let's say, $100 in terms of your security budget, and you're trying to instantiate a meaningful defensive posture, and let's say each domain of security tool costs $25 to invest in, vulnerability management, human risk management, um, EDR, right? Like what do you invest in? And you can put it all in one spot if you really want the best, right? But I'm just trying to understand like where's the best bang for your buck kind of thing.
I'll take a shot at it first and let the other guys chime in here. But if it was me and I could have only four things, then we start with threat intelligence, right? So 25 on threat intel, 25 on a SIM, 25 on NDR, 25 on EDR. I need to know what I'm looking for, and I need the three different domains for me to go and look for those things, right? So if I'm spending the money, that's where I'm putting it. Is I need data sources. I need to know what my threats are, and then I need the visibility to go and find them.
The only thing that I'd really add there, kind of throw in to change up, because I think we're pretty much on the same page there. Threat intel is obviously going to inform you. A SIM is pretty good to gather everything that you have and obviously be able to look through all of that. You're going to have plenty of things that are logging that aren't necessarily captured in another place. And then you're getting down to EDR and NDR, and NDR gives the entire picture and there's everything there, but I think you get a lot out of EDR. And if there's something else that you could do before you were mature enough, I would say take that other $25 and put it into people, right? Kind of invest in the people that you're using. and talk about the people that are threat hunting, maybe the training for the people that you have, retention, some other way to stand out and kind of grow the people that you have and what you have the capabilities to do. NDR is a pretty expensive solution. I'm here for it, and the packets don't lie, right? If something happened and you need to go back through everything, and you have every packet that traversed that network, you can tell exactly what happened, how it got in, what left, etc., and it's all there. But it's a super expensive solution in most cases, and I would argue that if there was something to be devil's advocate, invested in people and kind of grow the tools that you have for them, the capabilities that the people have to utilize the tools that you have.
Yeah, I think the less resources you have, the more you have to make very hard decisions about thinking about what exactly is going to create failure for me and how do I put resources in those things first, which is tragically why, like, even as a lifelong threat intelligence practitioner, if I only had $100, I wouldn't buy threat intelligence. Threat intelligence for me is one of those things that are forward looking, but if I'm in a crisis right now, ooh, I don't know. And so, like, for me, if I had four things I could buy, some type of endpoint AV EDR, some type of network detection prevention capability, some type of identity and access management capability, because that's what's causing most organizations to get lit up, and then maybe something within the realm of vulnerability or something to that effect, right? I think of each of those four areas. I imagine a world without one of those things, and I see complete and utter failure. And so that's why I would go to those four. But tragically, I think that's the situation that the majority of companies in this world are in. Most are making those very, very hard decisions, and most are going without in a lot of areas where it would be ideal to not go without.
Excellent. Thanks very much to the panel for some insightful and meaningful findings there. I think we're going to move into questions. So all participants feel free to enter those in if you haven't already, and I'll just go through the list of ones that have been submitted. The first one is, what kind of environments are you often encountering? It sounds like the implications IT, OT, maybe IoT, cloud, hybrid. Like, what kind of environments are modern organizations looking like today?
Go ahead, Scott.
So I see everything. The largest and most common one you're going to see is hybrid environments. Everyone usually has an on-prem AD, and whether it's AWS, Azure, Oracle, IBM Cloud, like whatever cloud provider, they always have something in a cloud somewhere. When it comes to OT or IoT environment, it really kind of depends on the industry. Manufacturing, hospitals. I mean, these type of OT environments can be so old sometimes that I've seen a 2003 domain controller in the past 5 years, which is crazy. But some of these environments need to have that, so they segment them off properly and it works for them. But it is very, very common to see hybrid environments. It is very rare to see a cloud-only environment. If you find a cloud-only environment, it's usually a very, very small organization. We're talking hundreds of systems. When you're at the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, you're always going to have some sort of hybrid environment.
Yeah, I'd certainly echo that. Everything today is generally some level of hybrid. There's some toes dipped in cloud at least, right? Even if it's just storage, if you're not necessarily doing any kind of compute, there are just some workloads offloaded to the cloud, that kind of thing. And then again, to Scott's point, industry kind of dictates that. Mainframes still in a lot of the finance industry and some other things there, right? So obviously, there's a lot of things that really kind of dictate that, but everywhere you go, even into those other industries, right, there's still some level of cloud and physical infrastructure generally in the larger environment. So anymore, it's not much of the soft GUI center and hard outside. It's just all soft GUI and not much of an exterior in some instances, unfortunately. But it's generally spread all over the place, and I think that's one of the things that's becoming an issue. To be completely honest, is keeping track of all that and the workflows and how that happens. One crack in the wall is all it takes, and that's generally pretty easy to let happen.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially with Coldfire and SimSpace's partnership with some of the cyber range simulation, given that we can certainly emulate hybrid environments that have both cloud capabilities and some of the on-prem elements, add in some of the tools that you described, or even Scott was talking about, right? That we would expect to see, maybe even see if the red team can evade, or if that's going to get detected or caught, and then determine how well the defensive team is going to be able to react. Sort of like, are we prepared enough? Which leads me to the second and final question that was submitted here. What emerging defensive tactics are you seeing that will become standard practice in the next 2 to 3 years? So I guess this would be more like, are you seeing anything novel or interesting from the defender perspective that's actually meaningfully defending people more than something before?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in and say something, which is that, and it's not something that's new, but adoption is still, I think, ramping up around, threat hunting and compromise assessments. Folks are, you go in and you meet with people who are incredibly seasoned security people, and they're doing all the right things from a programmatic standpoint. And then you say, like, okay, great. Like, you know who it is who's coming to attack you. You know how they're going to attack you. You have visibility into the different data sources that should tell you if that happens. You've got all these alerts set up. What if they're already here? And they're like, what? And you're like, what if they're already here? Like, do you know how to go and look and find them? Because if you were compromised when you deployed this tool or that tool, they may have just pivoted around it, right? If you were you brought somebody in to do a pen test or a red team, and an attacker was already in the environment, you might have taught them a thing or two, and now they've moved laterally and gotten deeper into the organization because they watched a pen tester do it. There are organizations who use internal and outside pen testing teams, but they've never done a threat hunt. And I think that folks are starting to understand, like, oh, we need these people not only on staff, but we also need them coming in third party and outside and looking.
I would agree with Neil. There's been this saying for a very long time that the perimeter is dead, and that you kind of have to assume access. That started becoming more and more salient even before COVID, when environments started to become distributed, and we started seeing adoption of these as a service capabilities and cloud capabilities, highly distributed organizations where you can't necessarily have a single perimeter. But then when COVID happened, it actually died forever, because what happened at that point is organizations stopped relying on these legacy on-prem brick and mortar type ways of thinking. They started distributing the environments more and more. And in the more highly distributed of a situation that you have, the more holes you are likely to have in ways that you are unlikely to understand. Holes pertaining to vulnerabilities, whether those be operating systems or application, misconfigured cloud configurations, it could be poor identity and access management. There are any numbers of reasons why the adversary is going to get inside of your network. And that's not just a logic thing, that's also a numerical thing. Like, if you look at the distribution between malware-based attacks and then living off the land or hands-on keyboard-based attacks, far more hands-on keyboard-based attacks are happening. 75 to 80% of all attacks that are measured, at least by CrowdStrike, are within that latter realm. And so once you kind of accept that, you realize, well, yeah, then the primary game is threat hunting. How good am I at this? And how can I hone my people in on doing this? And what technologies can I use to support this process?
The latter bit being almost the most important, because certainly we can make people more efficient. We can work alongside the threat hunting teams in order to enable them the best that they can. But if we have the right technologies, right, we get back to Scott's very first point, that when we hit against a certain amount of resistance, then attackers, APTs, cyber criminals are going to look elsewhere for lower hanging fruit. So if I were to reflect back a lot of what I heard today, it sounds like, obviously assuming breach, understanding that attackers will and have gotten in, spending money in the obvious places, especially when cash strapped and having the focus, but making sure to identify meaningful SIM, NDR, and EDR technologies, but then investing in training, investing in threat hunts, and investing in the right technology and tools. And then also utilizing AI to make us more efficient, to combat the ways in which adversaries are becoming more efficient with AI, not being scared of it, not giving them too much power or credence, but saying, you know what, we can fight back too. These are just people. These are not these, caricatures and larger than life, threat actors. They're real, just like me. Any other final comments from the group about anything we covered today, or any other kind of security recommendation or pithy piece of advice you'd have for our constituents?
I just like to say that the force multiplier piece that Jason pointed out as far as AI goes, let's look at it that way as opposed to being any kind of silver bullet again, just like any other technology though. But the force multiplier, right, and doing some of the things, the low hanging fruit, pointing out some of the things that we may miss because we're biased and doing the same thing over and over and over, and just kind of that new set of eyes, right? But looking at where AI can help kind of be that force multiplier and just help us get past some of the big issues that we deal with on a daily basis that seem so simple that it can help in that way a lot.
Yeah, I think there are definitely two parts to being in information security, and one is that the next thing will always be the thing that kills us all, or the next thing will be the next vendor will have the product that's going to save us all, and it's neither of those things, right? Again, this is a cat and mouse game. We two steps forward, two steps back sometimes, but we've got good people, and we've got a lot of history doing this. We're going to be all right. Take a deep breath. We can handle this.
That's great. I once heard someone say special forces is not special. It's doing the basics right every time. And that's kind of what I interpret that to mean. So if you want world-class services, both defensive and offensive, look to Coalfire and look no further. SimSpace, certainly a place for replicating some of these hybrid environments to facilitate some of these threat hunts and preparing for that bad day in cyber. But take a breath. Know that we're identifying force multiplicative solutions, and that we need to do the basics right every time. So guys, thank you for your time today. And please follow up with either SimSpace or Coalfire for next steps. Take care.